back one final time this week in the SPL. I guess we'll be back after Game 1 and after Game 2. But at the start of the set, one final time here this week. Already a couple exciting games of SPL action today, a couple 2-0s as well. In the second set, I thought could have gone anyway, but after the Dragons played that way in Game 1, figured they had the momentum going into Game number 2 as well. Not without a little bit of pushback, though, Gore, who now joins me on the desk for our third and final. I'm so used to saying second. We got 3 days of SPL on Sundays. How great is that?
3 days of SPL on Sundays.
3 games of SPL on Sundays.
I could have just let it sit. I didn't have to. I don't know why I did that. That was me.
We do have 3 days of SPL.
Yeah.
But 3 games on Sundays.
Yeah.
And an exciting one that we just had between the Bolts and the Dragons. One final game on the 3rd day of SPL here this week. And if that's just too many games for you to keep track of, don't you worry. We've got you covered here. Earlier on yesterday, Jade Dragons 2-0 win over the Valhalla Valkyries, followed by a Titans 2-0 win over the Camelot Kings, who Gore seemed near unbeatable up to that point. And then, wouldn't you guess it, a couple more 2-0s as the Tartarus Titans remain white hot, and so do the Jade Dragons. Now the Camelot Kings score will look to even up their score this week up against the Oni Warriors, get climbing back in the standings again. But how exciting would the standings be if the Warriors somehow win this set? Then we've got 4 teams tied at 3-2. And a couple of teams tied at 4-2 up top. All of these teams within, one game, one set of one another. I think that would be pretty indicative of the way the SPL is going.
I mean, yeah, it feels really weird. I think every year we always end up having this is the most competitive it's ever felt. This is genuinely the most competitive it's ever felt. And like that one, I'm saying this earnestly. Last year, like we'd say that, and it's like, okay, well, realistically, like the top 4 were the most competitive that we'd ever felt, and the bottom 4 were really competitive with each other. But like the matchups that were cross didn't necessarily work too well. This one goes from top to bottom. Everybody feels like at any given point they can at least take some really good team fights, get good leads. For the teams that are gravitating towards the bottom, it has just been taking early game leads and kind of shifting them into late game wins, things like that. We've seen that with the Valks. We've seen it with the Scarabs. We've seen it a little bit with the Oni Warriors, and so I'm excited to see what they're going to have to do, because I mentioned this towards the end of the last test, but this was the only matchup they had to prepare for today. So it should be interesting to see what they have to dish out. Yeah,
the Oni Warriors, an exciting team to watch. So have been the Camelot Kings up to this point here this year. The Kings, add them to the list of teams who have beaten teams that you wouldn't expect them to and then lose to teams that you expect them to beat. It has been a fun team to watch, Gore, who has not been shy at drafting some more unique compositions. No. Actually, this is one that I think of with the Neath and mid specifically for BMT, as well as Captain Twig on more of the knockdown. Instead of set up, you get the knockdown style of damage picks from Captain Twig. The Hebo has worked pretty well. And the Camelot Kings score such a strong team, but just never really showed up earlier on this weekend against the Titans.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think that was really surprising to everybody involved, was that there were just a few things where they just didn't click. I think I had mentioned it on Twitter. Someone had asked, but I think Twig was the 6th player ever to die to the Pyromancer, with Barra being the 5th right before it, right? So they're it doesn't get a lot of kills, at least in the SBL, things like that. Where little buff plays like that, but then I think they used Variety's ultimate on it, and there were just a bunch of little mishaps that it felt stacked up together and really led to them just not quite synergizing the way that we're used to seeing. And so I expect that, I don't want to say it was a fluke. I think the Titans earned that win, but I don't think we got to see the Kings at full power. I don't think the Titans let them get to full power.
No.
And I have a feeling that today we're going to see a Titans that comes back with a little bit more of a vengeance.
Even the best teams in the world have their off days, right? My Cincinnati Bengals just happen to have an off day in the Super Bowl, right? I mean, it just happens every once in a while you have a bad game. And so
think about it this way. At least this time you got to say in the Super Bowl, whereas last year, if you were trying to say that, you would have said they just happen to have an off day every week.
No, normally what it is they're competing to get the first pick in the draft, and they happen to win one too many games. It's the opposite.
They mess up.
They have an on game out of nowhere. Yeah, obnoxious. The Oni Warriors, a team that have done a little bit of everything so far this year as well. In 4 sets, the Oni Warriors have gone 3 games in 3 of them. The only 2-0 was a 2-0 loss to the Jade Dragons. But remember, this Oni Warriors team, they go 3 against the Bolts and look very strong in their first set, and then beat the Leviathans in 3, then fall to the Jade Dragons and look like the old Oni Warriors, and then stumble against the Valkyries, a 3-game win, though, for the Oni Warriors. And Gore, I truly can't predict this team. I think it genuinely depends, of course, on picks and bans and the strategies that they bring forward. I think the Oni Warriors might be one of the most game day dependent teams that we've got in the SPL.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what we were talking about last year with a couple of the teams, right? Where it's just like sometimes they show up and they look phenomenal, and sometimes you question whether or not they were even ready to play that day, right? And I think that there are teams right now that are struggling with some of those issues that the other teams so far have been able to clean up. And admittedly, that kind of makes sense, right? Because last year they were dealing a lot with more issues than just, hey, how do we work together as a team? This is the first time that they've been on LAN for an extended period of time together, because last year there was a lot of ping issues, things like that. And so I think there's still a couple of those growing pains that are putting them together. We have seen, though, this team can just absolutely run the show. And so I want to see if we're going to get that today, right? And I think that they're a team that I have high expectations for. It's just whether or not they can make it happen. I think that there's a lot to be said. Cuvo in the jungle, some days he shows up and he looks like, the exact way that you would have expected 3-4 years ago, and he runs the show. Same thing for Neil as a support. Same thing, out of Tings. He's been very consistent. I think Tings has been like the best performer Tings Dardes has been a very consistent performer on this team despite being in losses. So I'm interested to see how well he's going to match up, because Tings is not an easy mid laner to go up against. I think that core 3v3 is going to make or break the Warriors this time.
Well, look, the Oni Warriors are a team that has all the tournament potential, right? Even if you kind of go back and forth during the regular season, a team that still can surprise you come tournament time, and a player who has done that to the tune of a couple world championships is Neil Mata. Support for the Oni Warriors. Talk to us prior to this matchup against the Kings.
After last year, we obviously weren't happy with how everything played out. I think there were a lot of factors working against us. And this year, we really don't have any excuses, so we're just trying to realize that full potential. When we're on, we look like a team that can beat anybody. And we're off, we're making just poor mistakes, just not on the same page. So I think after 2 weeks, we've shown a lot of potential, which is really good. But now it's just going to be about building consistency going forward. I think just being more comfortable during a set. I think just making sure we're all on the same page, communicating well, and then we're just comfortable being in the game, don't have to force anything too hard. I think that teams fall into the trap, ourselves included, when you start looking desperate, you're looking for these all-in plays, and you're not just comfortable seeing what the team is going to do. You put pressure on them some, if they show up, that's fine. Just be okay going to late game, So I think that just going forward, if we just maintain the course we are, and then also make sure that we're just being patient and we're all on the same page, we're going to be doing great. Yeah, so next week when we play the Kings, they have a lot of different playmakers on that team. I think Big Man always looks like a star, but I also think that Captain Twig is really one of their big difference makers. When he's having a good game, a good set, they look phenomenal. And when he's being put behind and put in uncomfortable situations, they look a little bit worse. So I think that Twig is a really big playmaker for that team. Our team's expectations going to every set is to be just getting a win, whether that be 2-0, 2-1. The big thing for us going forward is the start of the year, so let's just make sure that we're improving at a pace that we're comfortable with, and just making sure we're not making old mistakes. It's okay for us to make mistakes here and there as we go throughout the year, but we really don't want to fall into some of the old habits we had last year, and we also just want to make sure that we're a winning team.
Sounds like a guy I want on my team. What a good mental that Neil has.
That's why he's a world's MVP.
A good head on his shoulders and a good head of hair on his head. That's all that.
I mean, look, I'm going to throw it out there for you. Like, I feel like they're this close because of his hair to getting like shampoo guys, conditioner. Like, come on, reach out to us. We got a perfect team for you. Neil's like the best sponsor.
What was the big one? I think Head and Shoulders in other sports leagues was a big one. So maybe
I'll take it.
Yeah, give them a
They'll
shot.
love it. Trust me.
Now if they start winning a little bit more consistently, I bet they'll get some nods. We got Mifflin on our team who could draw some of those as well. So maybe we'll see down the stretch. A lot of right. We're thinking, Gore. A lot of individual matchups that are very important here, and I think it's maybe unfair, but as of late, just the way the Kings have played, I think it's individual matchups where I expect the Oni Warriors will need to rise to the occasion in a few of their roles as we roll in to P's and B's for game number 1. I look towards the mid lane, Gore, because Big Man Ting's such a threat, so consistent. So I think Dardes, who has the ability to be one of, if not the best mid laners in the league, needs to rise up to BMT's level, or at least play consistently at Dardes level. I think mid lane, very important. Then I think Neil highlighting the jungle, of course, so strong, because I look at Cuvo Fred's last 6 games, 5-2-8, followed by 1-2-3. 0-4-4, followed by 2-4-4, so a couple rough ones, and then 6-0-7, and then 6-1-10. So you talk about like inconsistency, but also games where Cuvo Fred is playing so well. It's such a tough player, such a tough team to predict, and that's why, in my opinion, it really just matters on the Oni Warriors, to Neil's point, not falling back into some of those old habits, not finding themselves making mistakes.
Is this the most European matchup that we have in the SBL? And like 9,
Kings
everybody
are,
but Neil?
I think so.
And Netroid.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
So it's
if you said non-United States matchup, then I think
then it becomes absolutely correct. It's that EU that ends up going against each other. So I guess like there's that balancing point. The minute you said Kings, I was like, oh right, wasn't even thinking about them. I was just thinking about the Warriors as a team,
That's
and
right.
then I saw like Genetics and Big Man, and I was like, man, this is obscenely European for what we're used to.
It is.
I'm actually excited to watch this though, because again, more to your point, I think following up what Neil had said in that interview and what kind of you elaborate on. Is this Tings looks good no matter what. Tings looks better when Twig looks phenomenal, right? So when Twig is able to come into the game and he's looking for things, which already I'm feeling if this is jungle or solo, I don't really care. But if it goes to the jungle for Kleena, that's probably going to be great for Twig, and it makes, I think, Tings' job a lot easier. And I think those two in the 2v2 in mid that then eventually turns into a 3v3, I think Genetics just purely elevates that. Same thing can be said for Neil. And so I'm really looking at the consistency. Twig, last year, bouncing back and forth between sometimes. He'd have really great games, really not great games. I think he still does a little bit of that this year, and that's evident by, looking at yesterday, seeing how the Kings performed then. But like you just highlighted, Cuvo does that every set. Like it's not just, hey, how is he feeling on the day? Like it'll happen. One game he'll go insane, the next game he won't, the next game he will, and back and forth. So I think the junglers here are going to be interesting because both of them at the top end are just great SBL players.
Well, Gore, we talked about Neoma a second ago. Yamoja seems to be his pick. ESET has been ESET support more times than not. But it looks like it's going to be ESET mid or I guess ESET jungle, depending on what we see the Oni Warriors draft down the stretch. Okay, so no, not ESET jungle. I imagine working on an ESET mid for Dardes. And I like this for the Oni Warriors because think about some of the games where we've seen the best of Dardes between the end of last year and the beginning of this year. And it's when he plays the more unique Dardes-esque picks, the hi-rez, maybe the ESETs, things like that have looked great for Dardes. And so maybe it's a strong pick here for the Oni Warriors.
I'm actually excited to see this. The matchup, I'm going to presume, is going against this Neath. I think there's a couple of teams. If the Dragons lock in a Neath, I anticipate that it could be Panda Cat, it could be mid, right? It can bounce either way. When it came down to Europe, a lot of it last year, I have to give credit over to Zeros where it's due because the Valkyries decided to run a lot of Neath mid comps, and they actually ended up doing pretty well with them. Whether it resulted in wins or not was a different conversation. It at least looked good and played in purpose. And we've talked about it a little bit, but like you get to then shoot World Weavers to either side of the map. It's easy, consistent stuns for pretty much every fight that can go through, which is going to help out your jungler, either this Kleena or whatever else they might end up picking up if they do decide to swing this Kleena over to solo. But I do think that they get something that is going to be a much more comfortable pickup for Cuvo in the jungle. Last year, a lot of Circuit. And in fact, I think his Circuit is like his most played god, close to like 100 games on this pick. He's in the high 80s. He loves that one. Daji comes into the conversation, plays very similar, I think is a good pick for Cuvo to be able to make him capable of giving the plays that we want.
Now, I am curious, Gordon, and I'll fully admit my own lack of knowledge on this.
Okay.
There could be some counterplay in mid around ESET and Neath with World Weaver being so important. Drop a Dispel Magic, drop a Spirit Ball in that location, maybe disrupt BMT a little bit if you need those split-second ultimates from Neath. Maybe Dardes has the ability to slow some of that down if he's in lane. And so it could be some play around that here for the Warriors.
I think the key is that split second, right? So like in team fights, I think that's where we're going to get to see it. But a lot of the times, like early for me, I like if I'm going to Neath ult to the duo lane, I'm walking to my tower.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I'm not going to do anything in the middle of the lane. I don't want that guy getting close to me.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that, early on for some of these ganks, it should be maybe a little bit safer. But that should is always, like timid at best because All it takes is walking up to the tower line. You got Yamoja rotating maybe a little bit earlier. Your solo laner happens to come over for some reason, and now all of a sudden you can just walk into that tier 2. You can throw out the Spirit Ball, and if you're not ready,
Athena.
hell, even if you are ready, you're Neath. Your backflip's the most predictable disengage in the game, so it is pretty easy to shut down if they put themselves in a good spot.
Gore, what in the world? Okay.
Yeah.
So Neath, yes, there's no mage and there's no second hunter picked for the Camelot Kings. So like maybe Fafnir Neath in the duo lane.
I think it's Athena.
Queen could be mid. Queen could be a mid laner.
Yeah, if I'm looking at this, like based on what we've seen from other teams, it feels like Fafnir Neath duo, Kleena mid, Athena jungle, Cerberus solo.
Yeah.
But a lot of these picks have that flexibility. Like when you've got 3 Guardians, I don't think Fafnir has a lot outside of support that he can really do successful. So that one kind of boxes himself in. Cerberus doesn't feel like someone you want to bring into the jungle, so that sort of boxes him in. Athena is the flexibility here. She can be played mid, and I'm not sure if that's one that I put a lot of credence to. It'll be interesting to see if she ends up.
What about
Assassin
Assassin ADC, Gore?
What, an Assassin?
Could be Queen ADC.
I like things like that. When I'm playing.
All right, I'll peel back the curtain a little bit. Production absolutely helping us out here. It is Queen ADC.
No, here's what I'm gonna say.
I'll help. Go ahead.
It's that it's fun to play.
It is fun to play.
It was.
I do appreciate
season 7 set was going over
I
there.
do
a few
appreciate that
times.
production lets us theory craft a little bit before revealing the answers. And so Queen ADC.
I would not have put that on my list of things that I was.
No,
gonna
I
go
would
for.
never have gotten there,
Yeah.
to be honest. So Queen ADC, Neath mid, and then I think we got the rest of the picks correct there, Gore. So fun and unique, and something that think about disrupting the Oni Warriors. The team who kneels on admission is focused on not making their own mistakes. They're focused on that. Now they got to focus on weird lane matchups as well.
Yep.
And the Camelot Kings throwing a bit of a curveball in game number 1, whereas the Oni Warriors draft something relatively standard here, Gore. King Arthur for Nika, potential to totally take over a lane and a game. I love that pick. ESET maybe the weirdest pick that the Oni Warriors have drafted. Feels like a consistent team comp for the Warriors going into some weirdness from the Kings.
So after watching a ton of Smite, like there's a way, like when you see drafts, you can kind of envision a little bit of how like team fights are going to play out, or at least I can, right? I'll sit around and you could see like, okay, what are the engages? What are the tools that are going to be very helpful? You know, you've got the River's Rebuke, you've got Circle of Protection, and you know, when you have something standard like the Oni Warriors, you can see what their comp is aiming for. When you see the Kings here, all I can think of is that Kleena's been doing really well in the SPL, so that's good for them. You've got a few auto attackers that are going to benefit from the Fafnir, a lot of engage on this team, and so when it comes to team fights, a lot of hard bodies that can get into the front, a lot of people who can dive into the back, put a lot of pressure onto the Warriors. But it's that laning phase and that early game that really does come into question. And I think that's where some of the balancing act for the Kings is going to be here. I'm excited to watch how this one shakes out. Again, like way back when, like in Season 2, I used to love like playing with my friends when we would do like Assassin's carries, but we'd run like Kali, Ymir, duo lanes, things that were like just super unconventional. You go back, I mean, even last year we saw it a little bit. I know in Season 7, though, we saw a lot of Set kind of going wherever the hell he wanted. And I think Kleena might be in a similar position where you can maybe flex her into this. This will be the proving ground for her, right? Because a few Assassins have shown up over there in the duo lane. And they've benefited from it, right? They get a lot of farm, they get a lot of experience to really get themselves ahead, and they get a lot of 1v1 potential, so it's going to be fun to watch how Kleena can do, especially against Hou Yi, because Hou Yi's going to bop her unless she gets in the wall. There's a lot of stuns and damage dealing that he can do in return.
Or the SPL is just the gift that keeps on giving. Oni Warriors versus the Camelot Kings with a unique composition. Game number 1 of the final set of the week.
Our gift gets to be a Kleena ADC, at least that's what production has told us out here from the Camelot Kings. It's J-Mac and it's Mifflin jumping into game number 1 between the Warriors and the Kings here. It should be a fun one, at least out here, throwing an assassin in towards that duo lane. Because Mifflin, it's been a little while since we've seen that come out.
It has been. Generally, we see assassins that have got strong clear. Things like the set that Gore alludes to on the desk have just great clear ability and great boxing potential, good ability to close that gap. I'm talking about Skewer. Kleena doesn't have that until level 5. Pierce the Veil going to be very useful in just clearing out these waves and creating opportunities where you can look to play more aggressively towards the enemy hunter. But those first 5 levels, until you get that ultimate, that's going to be a bit of a struggle.
Dardes on this East set mid. It's a pick that we've seen a little bit less often than the East set support or even the East set jungle that was so popularized in the SCC. But it's a pick that a few of these SPL mid laners, specifically Shinto, really talked a lot of high praise on with how aggressive it can be, how well it does in the early wave clear here. So Dardes grabbing that one, and then just the top 3 that the Warriors were able to grab as a whole. I mean, you get Yamoja for Neil, and you get Daji, which has been one of the most banned assassins so far in Season 9.
And Daji as well has got some pretty good matchups up against the Camelot Kings, specifically Big Man Tings himself, going to struggle mightily against the Palau, as will Netroid, as long as Netroid isn't near a wall. If you actually get grabbed by the chains, you're able to walk into a wall and completely ignore it. So, small micro counterplays that could potentially come to fruition in this matchup, but that said, how often is Cubo Fred going to go up to the Palau and fully just like channel the chain? Generally it's, oh, I got my guy, pull him in instantly and try to get it before any CC immediately happens. So, potential there, but pretty unlikely.
We get to see the bully potential of this King Arthur. Before, only Final K was really bringing this guy out into the solo lane. We've gotten to see the success from him on the Dragons. Now Nika taking his hands on this guy with a Bluestone start of all things here, and probably the most common one that we'll probably see out of this one. I mean, the Warriors axe has kind of fallen to the wayside of popularity. This seems to be kind of the more common go-to for some of these Warriors.
Yeah, do you want to know the actual reason Bluestone, or like what makes Bluestone the option for these soul laners? It's if you've got more abilities than everybody else. If you have 4 or 5 abilities available to you in lane at all given times, like King Arthur does, you're able to proc that Bluestone passive more often and get a little bit more value from it. So, yeah, Nika's going to go towards this Bluestone, and he will be looking to fight up against Variety more often than not. That said, Variety on this Cerberus will have ways to deal with some of that sustain in the lane, steal away some of that HP from these potions. He's also going to be moving in towards that physical defense very shortly and will be allowed to double dip because there is not a damage split between the soul laner and jungler. So Cubo Fred going to become limited eventually in his gank potential over towards the soul lane. Once this helmet's finished up, potentially a Breastplate of Valor in that second slot, I think it's going to be more so about which one of these soul laners starts rotating first.
We're seeing a little bit of a change up as far as the Hunter builds have been concerned. A little bit more recently in these last couple of weeks, we've been seeing some strays away from these Dead Soul. Obviously with things like Uller, Bluestone is the more common thing, but a couple of these hunts have been going more towards this Gilded Arrow and then the Spike Gauntlet start, so going for a much more slow-paced, farm-oriented start.
Man, Gilded Arrow, I'm not even sure if I'm willing to call that slow pace. Just getting the additional attack speed, the additional auto-attack power as well. It's just incredibly strong, and in going for the Devourer's Gauntlets, it opens you up to build crit a little bit earlier in your build. I'm a massive fan of it. First person we saw in the SPL to bring this build was Zapman, and he's always been a trailblazer, but I think he might be onto something here.
Some action in the duo lane, at least the Mark of the Crow thrown on top of Netroid here, and we'll be keeping our eyes on this duo lane. Once these supports kind of leave the lane, it feels right now that maybe the Kings are kind of going into that hand that you were talking with, where Netroid doesn't really have a good wave clear until he's got that level 5, has a charge of the ultimate. And so they've really been sticking around over in this lane for maybe a little bit longer here. Mid-camps and the Oracles will go the way of the Oni Warriors, and that sets up for the instant respawn. Now the enhanced ones, Neil Ma eats the World Weaver, a little bit more damage. It's Captain Twig crashing in with the Defender of Olympus to take first blood for the Kings.
And that is just as simple as it gets. World Weaver sets up the stun. You've got all that time to channel Defender of Olympus, and looking at every single lane now for the Camelot Kings, besides Big Man Ting's lane, but it doesn't super matter because his integral part of the combo is the ultimate itself, has got great ways to close gap and make sure Defender of Olympus applies that damage. Variety can stun and slow from a range, have the ultimate for Big Man Tings, and then leap forward, Defender of Olympus dunk. Genetics, leap forward, stun, Defender of Olympus dunk. Even if Netroid in the 1v1 needs a little bit of help, which I don't think he will need a whole lot of help once he finishes up this next item, which I'm assuming is going to be the Soul Eater, he can just dash forward and immediately have that Defender of Olympus dunk. So that combo probably going to be pretty easy to apply throughout the laning phase here. Captain Twig, not the strongest jungler on the map in Athena to just gank on his own, but if you're initiating with the ultimate every single time, that's just a lot of damage.
Nice little shout to Rosie there for actually bringing up the leveling priority of Netroid here in that dual lane. We've been seeing a lot of different starts when it comes to the Kalina. It's actually going to be multiple points over in that first ability, that Scream for the primary wave clear here on this Kleina to start things out. Camelot Kings with that first blood and a little bit of extra farm have put themselves about 600 gold up so far in this early game and have already done themselves their very first obelisk. As you can see, that scepter already around Genetic's waist.
Yeah, I'm glad that you bring up the obelisk because that is one way the Camelot Kings have been continually finding separation in the early game. Something Aurora had actually brought up to me earlier today. He says, yo, when you watch the Kings play, watch the obelisk, watch them steal the flowers, and watch the greater Scorpion control. It's not all just macro farm in the neutral camps. It really does come down to these micro objectives, and the Camelot Kings are a team that love to play around it, especially throughout these early portions of the game. So I will be keeping my eyes on that.
Genetics be a little out of position here. Does have a defender of Olympus to help out. A World Weaver on top of Dardus. Circle of Protection is there to give a lot of healing back through, but Dardus stunned out. The waves will crash in, and Twig will get credit to the kill, but can Twig make it out? Yes, he can, because Big Man Tings is there for the backup. Even Netro joining the fight. Picks up a kill for himself, 3 assists to his name, and 4 on the board for the Kings.
3 dead for 10 seconds. Thought maybe we'd see a Gold Fury pool from the Camelot Kings, but not quite the case. Had Netroid still had a charge of that ultimate to pierce the veil, maybe you can look towards that great objective, but instead, reset back to neutral, steal away some of those cans, and take a major win. The Kings just out-rotating right now. Thought the Oni Warriors would have some fight-back potential inside the circle protection. Darda is actually very quickly able to beads out that stun, get that damage mitigation available to himself and his team. Heals back up to about 60%, but 60% is not enough to deal with 4 people stacked up on top of you.
No, be a crow on top of Netroid's head, and that Scream not going to get any value there from Netroid. Didn't hit the wave at all, but not too worried. Does have a charge that ultimate, and that's the power of this Kleina. It's something that we don't really get to see too often over in the solo lane, mostly because we rarely ever actually tune into the solo lane in a lot of these matchups there, but that's where that strength of the wave clear and that ultimate comes in on Matt God, seen on full display here for Netroid.
You know, J-Mac, I'm failing you here. This is on me. Do you know if Mark of the Crow shows vision inside the wall? Dardes, solo kill onto Captain Twig. Not solo, has the help of Cuvo Fred. I'm not certain. I know it reveals stealth, and I know that it's essentially a self-banish, but it's such a unique interaction. I just gotta assume yes. My internal SMITE clock is telling me yes.
That's the thing. That's something I thought at this point in my life I would have already tested, but I have not actually checked to see if that's a thing yet. Somebody can let us know out there. Maybe send me a DM or send Niflin a DM. Who knows?
Just type it in Twitch chat.
Yeah,
don't DM me.
Oh yeah, just type it out there if you actually do know. An ultimate onto Nika and a defender of Olympus. Captain Twig blinks in, taunts in, but Nika's got a second dash to try and get out here. Turns around for the stun, but big damage and a turnaround. Cuvo Fred has shown back up. Variety will trade in a 1-for-1 there. Cuvo getting credit for the kill onto the solo laner, and maybe a kill onto Captain Twig. No, not quite enough damage from Cuvo to close that one out.
Yeah, Cuvo has to play cautiously. No beads available, and Captain Twig already has, I believe, at least 4 points into the shield wall. So the damage output and turnaround potential certainly there, and Cuvo Fred decides to back up. If 1,000 cuts were still available, maybe we'd have seen the kill. Look back now at how Captain Twig does fall down earlier, and it was simple. Dispel magic into a stun, as if it were ESET support, but this time it does damage because it's ESET mid, Divine Ruin in that first slot, and Cuvo Fred around just to make sure it does go well.
I thought Genetic stole red with a hammer, and I was going to lose my mind for just a moment here, but does not. We do see a very slight XP lead over in the dual lane between the hunters, quote-unquote, the carry players over in this lane. 11-9. Should be pretty close to level 10 here for Vo, but we can see a 1,500 gold, 3,300 XP lead up on the side of the Camelot Kings. Now those obelisks are back up. I'm curious just how fast those things are going to go right back down.
Yeah, you can already see it stacked up to halfway by the Camelot Kings, and I imagine will continue to grow at a similar rate. We are now past the point where I'm concerned about Netroid's ability to play this guy in the lane, because he's going to do this every single time. Ult the wave, and then walk away and do whatever you want. That ult Pierce the Veil is persistent on the map. Vote may be able to put some damage out here. Beads forced by Netroid, and that should spell the end of this aggression.
Walk right out. Genetics is just casually strolling past 3 different players. Cuvo will put some damage into the support, but Genetics just walking through dangerous territory here. Will transform into the Dragon. No Omi left on Neil Ma, and a World Weaver to crash on him with Defender of Olympus. The 1-2 combo is back again in the duo lane. Cuvo Fred up on the Palau, but won't get to pull anybody in.
That is just such a potent combo the Camelot Kings have devised here. It's dirty. I mean,
gross.
I don't want to line up against that. I mean, the counterplay is tough. Even in trying to burn down your opposition before Captain Twig lands, that damage mitigation goes so far.
Taunted and the dash in by Netroid. Cuvo Fred goes down.
He's in
Vote
trouble.
has some distance, some decent damage out of Netroid. That last tick of the scream, not enough. He'll need one more auto after to put a double kill up for the Hunter. And this Kleena carry, man, it is starting to pop.
That's curtains for the duo lane. There's no fight back potential from Vote. And here's the thing, Hoyi is the best Hunter at fighting from behind, but I don't know, man. Kleena is just so well suited to take this matchup. Neoma approaching the Gold Fury. Does show face. The Camelot Kings respect it. Instead, turn their attentions to mid. Darda's in trouble.
Variety is just going for the 2v1. A beads burn out of Darda's. That'll be a pickup now. Rolling him right out of the circle of protection and right into the arms of big man Tings. The Camelot Kings have now put up 9 for themselves, and they could grab Neil here. Very low on Omi. Tier 1 tower at least should be the casualty for the Kings. They'll let it go only for a moment.
What an insane pace to this game so far. The Camelot Kings come out the gates roaring, and the Oni Warriors struggling to maintain pace themselves. 3,000 gold, but 6,000 experience. Probably the larger of the two separators at this point in the game, and that experience is mainly in the duo lane. 2 levels there, 1 level in support. Big man Tings 2 levels up over his opposition, and then 1 level each in jungle and solo. The Camelot Kings essentially have got free reign of the map and have literally got it now. That tier 1 mid tower so important at this portion of the game. At Pyromancer defenses, Gold Fury defenses, generally you like to retreat towards mid. No longer an option for the Oni Warriors, who will take note. Genetics strips away those wards from the Gold Fury. Netroid doing the exact same thing. Seems the Camelot Kings slow playing it, but make no mistake, they are setting up for this objective.
Setting up, Genetics is standing over by the obelisk, and here's the tale of how the game is going. Genetics is the same level as Vote, and Netroid
Surely
will
not.
be able to walk right through the wall, but Captain Twig is on the wrong side of the wall. He won't get to be a part of the early portion of the fight, but he'll show up for the tail end of it. A taunt will set up for the last auto for Netroid to take down the carry, and Vote once again will have to sit on the respawn screen.
Cuvo Fred dash forward, eats the backflip. That's slow, gonna make it harder for him to chase out. Uses the ultimate defensively to avoid the paralyzing spit, while the rest of his team is on to the Pyromancer, the consolation prize, because the Camelot Kings get the actual one. Gold Fury on the opposite side will go down handily to the Order team. 10-2 across the top. This is a long shot odds now. Tier 1 tower falls down as well. The Oni Warriors, they need time, and they need a lot of it to catch back up. A lot of farm separating these two squads, and I'm not sure how much more time they've got.
And look at what Genetics has gone for second item, recognizing how much diving that this team is doing, whether it be in the tier 1 tower, the tier 2s at this point here. It's an Emperor's Armor picked up. We haven't seen this item in quite some time, but if you're going to be doing this dive comp, jumping under these towers, these Phoenixes so often, perfect item to do so for Genetics.
It is. Those towers going to be attacking a little bit less often, and, well, that means you're taking a little bit less damage going forward. That said, I'm not even sure the Camelot Kings are moving these towers so quickly. Whether or not you get the real, I suppose, value of this item, depending on how much time you spend in them, and it seems like the Camelot Kings don't have to spend a whole lot. So maybe just go damage in the future if I'm Genetics. Like a Spear of Desolation, maybe a Divine Ruin. We've seen Awesome Jake do it all the time. Loves going towards at least a Bruiser option. Genetics seems to be of a like mind. Stone of Binding in the next slot. Whoever he applies his CC to will die expeditiously.
Captain Twig picking up one of his own alongside a Jade Emperor's Crown with that Divine Rune. So a little bit of anti-heal to try and deal with this Umoja, deal with this E-set. And we saw him pick up this Divine Rune very early, and it seems that Captain Twig wants to be the one to get these fights started. So as soon as he crashes down in the midst of it, whoever he hits is already feeling the brunt force of what this build has.
It is, and Captain Twig very survivable with this build as well. Can become that initiator for his team. Generally, when you go towards 2 Bruiser items back-to-back, you're sacrificing both damage and defense, but considering his entire team is playing with a significant lead at this point, I think Twig is allowed to go down this path and, well, can either be that damaging initiator, as you said, with the ultimate, or just dash forward and taunt. Like, who's going to return the damage to you quickly enough to punish you? I'm not sure that anybody on the Oni Warriors is enough of a threat that Twig needs to concern himself. Also has counter matchup into a couple of the pieces of the Oni Warriors. 1,000 Cuts, Wing Gust, both Dardes and Cuvo Fred, large channeled abilities. Can't do that if Captain Twig's nearby. That taunt, Confound, just going to cancel it out.
Genetics will transform and maybe set up for a gank here
Surely
with the
not.
Defender of Olympus. That'll at least force the Suns out of Vote. That'll cancel out the wave. But now all of the Kings are already on the left side of the map, so they'll have to turn their sights maybe towards the mid. Big Man Tings charges up an ultimate. Cubo Fred dunking down on top of backflip will get Big Man Tings pretty far.
Bye.
Just enough to get away, but Cubo gets picked up by Variety and then put right back down.
Stun no good from Genetics there. Dart is able to narrowly escape, dying himself. Cubo Fred, not quite as lucky, will spend 30 seconds in the grayscales. Netroid, the soloingest Hunter player in the entirety of the league, will start to work his way behind this tier 2 tower. Just put out some poke.
I'll throw out 2 of those veils just to keep the enemy team from walking into that tier 2 tower. And here's where the power of that Emperor's Armor comes in. It only fires off maybe 4 shots for that entire duration there. So the Kings have now taken the second tower in mid lane off of the map. Only 2 left standing at only 16 minutes.
You know, the Kings are a team, and it's almost become a meme. Every time they're like, yeah, we're trying to hide strats. We don't want anyone knowing what we're cooking up. This is what they're cooking up, and I could understand why you don't want a team to see this before you use it to play on field, because there are legitimate answers to this style of draft. Legitimately, it's just have Cubo Fred sit on top of Netroid in the lane. When Assassins go into solo, they're at least allowed to play near their own tower. That lane's so much shorter. But in the duo, Netroid spends time on enemy tower line. It takes like 10 seconds to get back towards your own. So had Cubo Fred made some rotations over towards the duo lane a little bit earlier on, could have alleviated that pressure, vote from ahead, could probably dominate that lane. Ho Yi with a lead, just impossible to deal with. But instead, it's Kleena from ahead, with a lot of sustain thanks to Soul Eater, a massive experience lead, and I'm not even sure that Netroid has locked eyes with Cubo Fred even once so far this game. The Camelot Kings firmly in control, and I'm thinking it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better for the Warriors.
I mean, Netroid's already picked up a serrated edge. He's now 4 full items deep in the build, plus a starter item. Even Big Man Tings isn't up to that point just yet, as he's only sitting on that tier 2 charged Morningstar. This heroic teleport that just got purchased by Variety, we've been seeing that kind of pop itself up here a little bit more often than the persistent teleport from these solo laners. I mean, is this passive really just that strong with it, Mifflin?
I mean, just being able to, well, so often when you're teleporting to a ward, it's slightly further away from the actual fight itself, so getting that additional movement speed to close that gap, valuable in its own right. But if you are TPing in the middle of the team fight, having additional protections, similarly strong. Persistent teleport, sure, has a very low cooldown, but generally you're only getting 1 teleport off per team fight anyway, so I think that the heroic teleport properly valued here in the SPL.
Big Man Tings charging up that ult after the Pyromancer goes down to the Camelot Kings, and we're already staring at a 7,000 gold lead that the Kings have. Cubo Fred spots a single enemy on the opposite side, and he will teleport his way back out to safety. But Captain Twig is here, a big taunt and a bead, so that'll be a World Weaver.
Yikes. On
top of Vo, down to a 3rd HP, and will have to go back to base. That's an ultimate down from Big Man Tings. That's been part of their primary combo to eliminate these Oni Warriors off the map.
Yeah, and that was, what, 30% of Vote's HP bar from Big Man Tings' ultimate, and that's before we even have the Mannequin's Hidden Blade. That's before we see, like, a Titan's Bane pickup, or even the Rune Forge. Curious how much damage Big Man Tings is going to do with this build by the end of it. But as of now, I think it's just enough. Vote probably not too happy with having to go back to base there and then losing out on that defensive relic. Massive target on the ADC's back, and the Camelot Kings have already been putting a ton of aggression his way. Can only imagine they will continue to do so. We're at the portion of the game, I think we've been at this portion of the game as well for probably like 4 minutes now, where the Camelot Kings could legitimately just walk to the Fire Giant.
They could. It seems that they're at least starting to position that way. Genetics will pick up his Scepter, and that'll give him a little bit of extra burn potential over at that Fire Giant. Give his team maybe a little bit more healing as well as they stand around with that HP 5 boost. Captain Twig been a part of every single one of the kills so far this game, 3, 1, and 8 on the Athena, effective in all 11 of them. And look at this 4th item on both him and Variety, that Spirit Robe. That extra crowd control reduction that's coming from that item, plus that passive. This item has really been popping back up recently.
Yeah, the mitigation is going to go a long way against this style of draft from the Oni Warriors. It's CC initiation from Dardes, from Neilma. Even Nika and Cubo Fred going to apply a whole lot of CC in their own kits and vote stuns to start off his own fight. Every single one of those going to proc that additional percentage mitigations for the Camelot Kings. That's assuming that Cubo Fred was allowed to fight back and apply some of that CC, but my man did not even get enough time to put his hands in front of his face to protect him. The Camelot Kings pull the Fire Giant, and it's burning fast.
Genetics up in the Dragon transformation. It's 4 versus 5 now as they pulled off the Fire Giant. Neilma will be able to walk away, but Big Man Tings backflips right into them, forces out a Riptide, but a long-range leap by Genetics will catch out Nika. Neil Ma rooted under and picked up by Variety. Not quite enough damage in a circle of protection to heal up Neil. Captain Twig is the one taking a lot more return fire here for the Camelot Kings, but he's got that ultimate. He can be right back in.
Yeah, great ult from Neomar to separate that fight and make sure a bad situation doesn't get a whole lot worse. That said, there's the ultimate from Captain Twig, and he's immediately rejoined the entirety of his team, who are all healthy, by the way, and will burn down this objective pretty quick. Looks to me like the Oni Warriors have got vision in the pit, though. They should be able to see the Fire Giant's HP.
Cubo is back up and making their way in. They've got ultimate. Ultimate from the Neath goes on to Nika, who is CC chained into oblivion. Barely gets off that Excalibur's wrath, but he's still going to go down as soon as he lands in. Captain Twig credited to the kill, and the Oni Warriors again in another 4v5.
Yeah, Big Man Ting's doing so much damage at this point. Does have the Mannequin's Hidden Blade now, so when that ultimate comes back up, the initiation going to be very powerful. The Camelot Kings happy to keep resetting this objective, happy to keep taking the team fight, because I don't think there's a very high chance that they lose out on any of them. 3 members of the Oni Warriors hovering nearby. Can Variety be that wall to make sure this is not a coin toss?
They've got to get this Fire Giant quickly. Variety does at least find 2 in the back line. Neilma down to half. Dardas chased out by Variety. The taunt in on towards Vote. Gets a lot of damage in, but Cubo's up with the Palau. Gets 1 set of beads, but pulls in Captain Twig, and that should be the jungler down. Big Man Tings caught up on a Spirit Ball and a dunk in by Vote.
Okay.
Makes it a double kill for the Hunter. Variety falling low. Netroid finds 1 up against Neil Ma. The Sun's Ray down. Netroid finds a double, but Vote finds a triple in the midst of the fight. Variety will make it back to base. It'll just be Genetics left here. A Spirit Ball by Dardes, and Vote closing in on trying to get this Quadra kill, unless Variety has shown back up. Full HP on the server. It's a stun over the wall. Vote is low, but Nika's back.
It's going to be a leap for Variety. No good. Vote holding on to just a little bit of HP, but not for long.
Variety picks up 1. Dardes and Nika now fighting up against it. Genetics doesn't have enough health. That kill goes to the mid laner, and now Variety, who just got back in the fight, who just picked up a kill, has to fight against 2, finds a good stun up against Dardes, and a leap over the wall won't get him far enough. Nika will chase down. I'm not sure just how much kill this King Arthur has.
I don't know. They should be able to at least lock him down for a little bit. Variety over the wall yet again, still sustaining thanks to Fire Giant, and now with the help of Captain Twig. Could have maybe stuck around, but at least will use it to disengage. Cost him his blink, and it cost the Camelot Kings 4 of their Fire Giants. The Oni Warriors able to miraculously take that team fight and keep things at least slightly interesting going forward. That said, Variety with Fire Giant is not nothing. Should be able to sustain up these towers very well, look towards these tier 2s. Primal Fury going to be respawning very shortly. The Camelot Kings may not have been cleanly in their taking of the largest neutral objective on the map, but I would not fear if you're a Camelot Kings fan. There is still plenty of hill to climb for the Oni Warriors.
Still an 8,000 gold lead up here for the Camelot Kings. And the Warriors do put up a good fight there, traded out like a 4-for-4 trade throughout all of that. Variety almost dies, teleports in, almost dies again. Captain Twig even getting his ultimate back up to maybe try and re-engage that fight if necessary here. But now with all ultimates starting to come back up for the Kings, they'll regroup over towards this left-hand side, tier 2 tower. Don't think that the Warriors going to want to put up a defense here. They'll let this tower go down.
Yeah, tier 2, a foregone conclusion, especially with Variety, the sole remaining Fire Giant on his team. Able to act as that goaltender, keep 3 members of the Oni Warriors at bay. But it will not be a continued siege from the Camelot Kings. Instead, reset, spend up all that gold, and get ready for yet another push, perhaps on the right-hand side. Tier 2 tower there should fall down relatively easily, but it's going to be a little while till the Fire Giant itself comes back. The Oni Warriors effectively just buy themselves another 5 or so minutes in this game to farm up. And what did I say earlier? What's the one thing the Oni Warriors needed? It's just a little bit of time. Their team fight composition is strong on the Warriors. It's just whether or not it was strong enough to line up 2 entire items down. It was not. But now it's slowly starting to close that gap. You only tick over to level 21, so you can only get 6 items in a build. Camelot Kings rapidly approaching that 6-item point. The Oni Warriors, well, they'll get there eventually.
It's going to be extra anti-heal on the side of the Kings for Variety. He'll pick up a Divine Ruin last slot and an Ethereal Staff, at least for the jungler here in Captain Twig as the 6th item up. But with that Mannequin's Hidden Blade you're talking about on Big Man Tings, and now a Heartseeker to line up here. This Neath that was already chunking health bars is going to be hitting even harder.
He will. So the initiation is pretty clear. Big Man Tings is very scary right now. Neath crouching in the middle of the lane. Not generally going to be enough, but now just dropping Cuvo Fred down to 50%. That's a good start.
So, good
wow,
heals up,
resustained.
though. By Neil Ma, at least will make sure that he's not in too much danger at the very least here. Tier 2, a defense by the Oni Warriors. They're all 5 grouped up here. Netro will just throw some damage inside that wall. But now with the Fire Giant buff worn off, it seems the Kings are not too concerned with trying to push up this lane over on the right-hand side. They've decided to back themselves off and seal away some of the farm on the opposite side of the map.
Yeah, plenty of buffs to collect, plenty of scepters to pick up, and then the Camelot Kings, in just under a minute, will start to work their way back over towards the Fire Giant proper. At least push up some of these waves, force the Oni Warriors to worry about that slightly, but it is just that. We're waiting for now. Both teams biding their time for the largest neutral objective. Whether or not the Oni Warriors are going to show up and put up a defense again, I think is pretty clear. The last team fight went much better than I think anyone would have expected for the Oni Warriors, so why not try again? Maybe even establish some more aggressive warding on the Camelot Kings side of the map if they're lucky. Not a whole lot of wards in the pockets of the Oni Warriors, though, so that opportunity may have been lost already with Variety reestablishing the defensive positioning. The team fight ideology for the Oni Warriors should revolve around Cuvo Fred. Whether or not he's able to close gap into that backline and deal with Big Man Tings, that's one massive place to start. The Camelot Kings have not put a lot of priority into protecting their own backline. It's all been about that dive potential. That leaves Big Man Tings exposed, and that's one chink in the armor that maybe the Oni Warriors can exploit.
Well, now we have a group up around Fire Giant. Has already crashed back down and is awaiting its opponent to step into the ring. Oni Warriors, though, sitting very far back. Ricochet just off the mark by Vote. Won't find anybody there. Only a stun from Neil Ma. But he's got a decent bit of CDR and sustain back into the kit, so he'll have that Omi back up very quickly. But we've been seeing Netroid do this consistently during these fights, is jumping in these walls, jumping these traps down, laying out these tripwire mines, essentially, up against the team.
Captain Twig in first as a taunt. A lot of damage into Neil Ma.
Neil Ma down to a quarter health. Dardes down to half by just Variety alone. And with 2 of them so heavily poked out, the Kings can back their way up towards the Fire Giant, or they can set up for another potential pincer up here against the Warriors. But Netroid's eating a lot of damage inside that wall. He'll have to poke himself right back out. Fire Giant starting down to half. Nika will take some damage. Variety has to use the ult to get away from the Pal Lao. Nika wants to get in. He'll find Netroid and force the dash out, but even Nika and Neil are both down to half health. River's Rebuke will catch out Variety for a moment, but the leap over will be good enough until Cuvo Fred dives in the backline and finds the first.
So the Oni Warriors decided to take option number 3, I suppose. Why dive the backline and why defend in base when you could just go ahead and deal with the front line of the Camelot Kings? This fight may have turned around completely. Fire Giant, burn it quick.
Captain Twig goes in, finds 2 with the taunt. Its beams burned away. The Sun's Rain on top of the Fire Giant pit. The Warriors will get the Fire Giant, but Captain Twig crashes into the middle of 5. Netroid is low. Netroid is gone.
Are you serious?
Credit to the kill. Genetics goes down to Cuvo Fred, and Nika will chase out Big Man Tings, who is on the run and has separated himself from Captain Twig. But Big Man Tings, he's doing a lot of damage back to Nika. Can't really return that fire, but Cuvo can.
Double kill for Cuvo Fred, and the Oni Warriors have got a whole lot of time to play with and a whole lot of HP to use. Could be, we're just looking at the end here.
It's gonna be a close one. Variety up in 6. Captain Twig, no ultimate, back to base, and a power potion in hand. But it's gonna be 2 versus 5. The Oni Warriors, in one massive team fight swing at that Fire Giant and 1 to follow, have just turned this game back around. Pal Lao won't pull anybody. Variety will grab a couple with the ult, but they're not doing a whole lot of damage to the Titan. Nika is already gone. A teleport in by Cuvo Fred onto Captain Twig. But the 3 carries in the 4th will now dive in, and the Titan will finally go down, if not at least for the best defense that Captain Twig and Variety could put up. But the Warriors, what a turnaround.
For 25 actual minutes, it was unmitigated disaster for the Oni Warriors. Every single lane struggling, couldn't pick up a single bit of neutral farm to save their lives. But at the SPL, the highest level of play, it's something that we say all the time. It is demanded of excellence to find wins, and this time, one mistake, one overstay from Variety cost the Camelot Kings the match.
Cannot give any of these teams out here an inch, because they will take a mile in these fights. They will continue to push that boundary here. And it's something that we saw from the Warriors up against the Leviathans. Leviathans gave them an opportunity, and the Warriors were able to take it here. A great capitalizing here from the Oni Warriors. They take game number 1. We'll take it to a break. We'll come back to this for game 2.
Yeah, everybody fall down once. Yeah, every logo fall down once. Yeah, everybody fall down once. Every logo fall down once. Hold it when it come. It ain't gonna stay when it drop, and when it fall down, pick that up. Hold it when it come. It ain't gonna stay when it drop, and when it fall down, pick that up.
Listen to me, this love is a rocky road. Don't know who you are till you get too close, yeah. Got a heart that's good as gold. Put some respect on my name. It's in the past, don't you worry, baby. I won't budge, won't judge, that's a promise, baby. Cause we could all use a lifeline, make it last a lifetime. Picture perfect scenes ain't the model, baby. Sliding down the runway, church on a Sunday, these two birds in holy matrimony, tricks and ponies, bells and whistles, golden this is so official, yeah, they bearing 2 doves. Honestly, don't matter who around us, long as you around, cause I would never give this up, yeah. No matter who around us, listen to the sound of me, plus you want to dance with me now.
All that's said is done, all that's done, gone under the sun. Won't you come with me, fall in love like nothing matters except for us.
Yeah, everybody fall down once. Yeah, every logo fall down once. Yeah, everybody fall down once. Every logo fall down once. Hold it when it come. It ain't gonna stay when it drop, and when it fall down, pick that up. Hold it when it come. It ain't gonna stay when it drop, and when it fall down, pick that up.
I can't believe my eyes when I get close to you, close to you, close to you. You said hello and I lost my control in just one tiny second. You do to me what I've seen in the movies, but this really happening. My mind explodes. I can feel my bones.
of game number 1. This sentence might come as a bit of a surprise. The Oni Warriors take game number 1 over the Camelot Kings, and I can't believe it either. The Kings rolling over the Warriors in game 1. All the lanes winning. The jungle's looking great. Solo lane fantastic. Big man Ting's looking effective out of mid. And the Oni Warriors just delay and team fight more effectively around the Fire Giants. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but the result effectively that, Gore. And the Oni Warriors, I think, probably end this game in a gold deficit still. And end this game they do after a nice Fire Giant fight.
And it is very much what you said, right? I mean, you watched, probably 20 minutes of this game, maybe even a little more, and the Warriors are losing. Like, by all, for all intents and purposes, they are not victorious. They lose out on that first Fire Giant, but they get a lot of kills, and that's exactly what you had highlighted. A lot of good fights that go their way, and you get to see, I think, the culmination of what their team fight is capable of, and it really did exceed expectations. Look at the gap between the first highlight at like 8 minutes, the second one's at 28 minutes. Like, I mean, they really weren't getting a whole lot done throughout a lot of that. Maybe every now and then you'd have a couple of fights that went their way or a couple of kills that they'd be able to pick up. But it wasn't until really, the one before this and, of course, this fight where things really solidified themselves and became a huge priority for the Warriors. And it just goes to show that even if you're at a lead, I mean, you're talking 8K up right now for the Kings. It's not all done there. And I mean, exactly like you had highlighted, it is a loss that they are able to kind of mitigate, even though they are behind in gold. I won't be surprised if the numbers don't even look that great for them, because at the end of the day, they won let's call it 3 or 4 incredible fights, right? One where they strip away a lot of the FG buffs, one where they kind of go even with the Kings, and then one where they win the game. And so a lot of just good play towards the very end of it for the Warriors is what rights the ship.
And Gore, I wonder how much of this is composition-based. I mean, you get some good range with BMT, but Netrioid's got to get in there. Genetics has got to get in there. They're set up between Twig and Variety. But that's a lot of close range action. Dardes and team fight, and this is all team fight based, right? Once you get out of laning phase, and the Oni Warriors are able to team fight so effectively, I wonder how much some of that is composition based. Vote really stood out to me in a couple of those fights. There's one fight where Vote gets a triple, and outside of a sneaky gank from Variety, nearly made it a quad. And so there were definitely some Oni Warriors. And it's a type of game where they show us what type of fighting and team they're capable of being.
And we just missed it for 25 minutes.
We missed it for 25 minutes or so. And so I think, Gore, ultimately, of course, if you're the Kings, you're sad that you lose game 1.
Yes.
But you got 20 out of 27 minutes to be happy about if you're able to clean that up.
It's a really weird conversation, because it's like, what did you do wrong? And it's like, well, I guess you got a lead, and then you overestimated how much the lead was worth. I'm trying to even break it down for them, because early on they're getting a lot of kills. Towards the mid, they're leading by kills. Even in the last fight, they're up by 8,000 gold. It just comes down to priority and maybe target positioning, things like that. I think that we got to see, you had highlighted it, not just the Ho-Yi, I think, popping off, but I do think the Yemoja and specifically the E-set, all 3 of their ults really being essential, having a circle of protection that really helps heal everybody up, helps secure objectives. Yemoja helps heal everybody up, but also has great walls. And then, of course, the Ho-Yi, the Suns, being able to get all those damage out there. I think that we also get to see Cuvo have a hell of a game on this Daji towards the end. And a lot of that is Powwow related, forcing ults out of the Kings where there weren't beads, specifically out of the Cerberus several times. That Variety wasn't able to be aggressive, wasn't able to jump in and pick people up or force their beads, but instead was forced to use the ult to get that CC immunity to not get pulled in by Cuvo. And that really made things a little bit easier for the Warriors to take these team fights, and specifically the early engage.
I wonder how much, Gore, as we move into picks and bans for game 2, the Camelot Kings abandon that strategy, go back to something a little bit more standard, because it's not unheard of in game 1 of a best-of-3 set to keep things a little bit more interesting, more so in a best-of-5 when you really have a little extra wiggle room, now needing to win 2 straight, or the Camelot Kings. But not unheard of in game 1 of any set to be a little bit more creative with your composition. We are rolling through the ban phase here, and the bans very similar, except it's a Yemoja ban against Neoma instead of Zeus. The Camelot Kings stick with AMC and Medusa, but again, Yemoja instead of Zeus banned out this time. And then Bologna, Khepri, and Artio were the Oni Warriors bans in game 1. Now Zeus will take a ban column here from the Oni Warriors. So Zeus remains banned, just flip-flops teams. Kleedna remains the King's first pick. And what, look, was effective for Netrioid, right? I mean, 6 kills in that game and only a couple of deaths. But again, maybe the range is what you were missing. So Kleedna, a strong pick regardless, whether solo, jungle, or I guess
apparently ADC.
And that'll keep the Oni Warriors guessing.
And I think that's the glory of this pick, right? Early on, now you have so much flexibility because we've seen her competitively in 3 different roles and was still performing incredibly well, right? Like, I don't think you can call anything of what happened for the first few minutes for the Warriors necessarily the controlling and shutting down and keeping this cleanup from getting anything done. In fact, I think that if they anticipate it going over there, maybe they can pick something better. I have a feeling, like, I mean, even looking at that comp, we were talking about it, but like towards the end of that, you know, you have to assume you're a Ho Yi potentially going up against a Neath or something else that's going to be really weird. I don't think you anticipate the Kleena here. I won't be surprised if they maybe wait on a Hunter pick for a vote just to see what he's going to be handling over there, because you don't want to show your hand too early. And with things like the Medusa already banned, Amuz and Cobb already banned, it's not like you're really grasping. Like there's no other Hunters right now that have really climbed to the top the same way.
Right.
And so I like where their mind is at. I mean, you know, the E-set worked really well. They don't have the chance for the Emoja. And so just grab the 2 things that worked out incredibly well in your top 3 last time and keep them in the top 3.
Yep, E-set and Daji for the Oni Warriors. And again, good down the stretch for Cuvo Fred. 4, 6, and 6 isn't the best KDA, but when a lot of those 4 kills and 6 assists came in a pivotal part of the game that helped the Oni Warriors win game 1, I don't think Cuvo Fred post-game was all that concerned about how his KDA was. He's just happy himself and the rest of the team turned it around. We'll get a good look and a good idea of what the Kings choose to do here in their next couple of picks, as it was Kleedna and then Fafnir and Neath in game 1 is how picks 1, 2, and 3 went for the Camelot Kings here. And that will likely tell us how similar or different they feel like they need to change up their draft. Because it is a unique spot where you lose, but like you're so far ahead. Like clearly the draft works. Clearly the draft works in some capacity, but it's the Kings trying to decide where it fell apart. Was it the team fight phase? Were we missing range damage? You know, traditional mage style of thing. That's where Big E and the rest of the Kings will get things together. That's my fantasy coach. I need some fantasy points for adjusted drafts. How do we score that? I'm not sure how we do, but coach impact on draft, that's what I need. Let's get Big E and the boys need to get back on track. It was still a good fantasy game for all of the Camelot Kings.
Yeah.
Minus the winning part. Cerberus ends up getting picked here, and that was Variety's pick in game number 1. So 2 out of 2 are the same, and now 3 out of 3 are the same. But again, still some flexibility there. Cerberus technically can go support. Cerberus can go solo. Kleedna can go jungle. Kleedna can go solo. Neath can go ADC. Neath can go mid. And so it's now those final 2 picks for the Kings that'll be different.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they're going to do here if you're the Warriors. I feel like a support would probably just be easy to lock in and not worry too much about then your solo laner and your carry until after you see a little bit more. But the problem is you get 2 picks here, right? You get 1 and then 2 bans. So now Fafnir, I want to say, kind of acting as another ban. The Kings can't get that back. So you can then throw up 2 more Guardians onto the board to try and limit genetics a little bit more. Because I think even though Cerberus can technically go over to the duo lane, it doesn't happen too often, and with just Fafnir over there, I don't know if I expected Genetics. I think Genetics and PBM are a couple of the players that have done it more recently, but it doesn't happen enough that I would, like stake my claim on it. Instead, I think this is one where, again, you have to be oh, it's just really awkward. Do you ban junglers? No, because you don't know if that clean is just going to end up in the jungle. Do you ban mid laners? Well, what if Neath just ends up there? Do you ban hunters? I don't know, because you never know if she's going to end up going over there. So instead, I think that, you can ban Guardians and maybe do a little bit of both. Ban one that goes into the jungle and one that would maybe go to Genetics. But either way, I think the Warriors, this is a very difficult ban phase to have to approach, and a pick phase, because now you have to go for an entire other pick, and you have to figure out what your matchups are going to be. You're going to have to grab solo or carry here. And last time around, it was the Hunter.
Yep.
But I don't know if they want to go for that this early.
Camelot Kings stick with 4 out of the same 5 bans from game number 1. Yamoja instead of Zeus being the big difference. It was Camazot's Cthulhu in both game 1 and now here in game 2 in the second phase of bans. Apparently, Athena's a jungle ban nowadays. That's what we've got to look forward to. And then Habwa as well. A ban through the jungle. Chernobog, okay, that keeps things interesting. That opens up some split push potential later on in the game. If you're in a position where you're defending against fire minions, that helps you out in that regard with Chernobog's ult, as well as rotating into fights all over the map. And the Camelot Kings now, with the Athena ban and the Fafnir pick, are going to have to pick 2 different characters down the stretch here. Geb, obviously a different look for genetics and support. And Poseidon, that's a strong look for Captain Twiggore. Unless it's Neath ADC, Poseidon mid, Kleedna jungle. Could be Neath mid, Kleedna ADC again, Poseidon jungle, Serb solo, Geb support. So again, still some flexibility. The point that I look at, though, is early in the game, if it ends up being Neath mid or ADC, regardless of where Neath goes, pairing that with a Kraken from Poseidon should be some confirmable kills once beads are down.
Yeah, I think this is going to be fun to see how they shift these around, because I see this, and man, like what you had highlighted, the second one, you know, where you have a Poseidon mid, a Neath carry, Kleedna jungle, Serb solo, Geb support, that's very standard.
That's about as standard as it gets.
It's going to play Smite.
Yep.
If this is going to be Twig in the jungle on a Poseidon, I think it's worth mentioning that until earlier this week, Poseidon was on an absolutely awful, awful streak.
Yeah, not a good thing.
As of late. And it's so wild because I wanted to look it up just to like Twig's like Poseidon stats, because it's like he's played it in the jungle a few times. He played it a lot in mid when they were playing a few years ago. And he's got an 83% win rate on it. The problem is that like the other 17% of those are the ones that are really memorable, because a lot of them were in like Worlds finals where things just go really, really catastrophic for him. So in theory, maybe not as bad a pick, I think, for them as it could be. But is it, like, in my mind, is it worth going the Poseidon over the Kleedna there? Absolutely not. I think that it's just one that's maybe even more of a risk. Like, you can just be risk averse. I don't know if he necessarily is going to be better in mid for you.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can convince me that Poseidon jungle is better than Kleedna jungle.
I'm still trying to, if Kleedna is over an ADC,
yeah,
I'm hard pressed, because in my opinion, especially with all the success that like UGA, and I promise this has a point, that Georgia's had like in football, where they always lose to Alabama in the SEC championship, or they beat out, whatever it is, that when you play a team a second time, it's so hard to beat a good team a second time, because they've kind of got you figured out. I feel that way, Gore, with a lot of Smite compositions as well, where like if you stick Kleedna ADC, feels like a good enough team will say, all right, here's what went wrong for us with Kleedna ADC in game 1 if we're the only Warriors. Here's what went wrong for us putting Neath in certain, things like that. You feel like good enough teams can make adjustments to. So I still think could be a strong look for Netrioid if it ends up being a Kleedna ADC. But again, I think a good enough team, and I think the Only Warriors can be a good enough team to make the necessary adjustments to not allow Netrioid to get off to quite a tear.
What if I'm going to try to sway myself and maybe sway you here with just numbers? That is, I said 83% win rate when Twig's playing Poseidon. Mm-hmm. Does it make you feel a little more confident in trying to send that to the jungle if you know that it's a 40% win rate when Tings is playing it? So, like, it's performed worse for Tings out of the mid lane historically?
I think it does.
I don't know. It's a really weird thing, because do I think Tings is playing incredible Smite and could make this Poseidon look good? Absolutely. But numerically, it hasn't really treated him too well. Granted, I don't think that we have, like, enough, at least for me, to feel confident saying, like, yes, this is, like, not going to be a pick for him. He shouldn't do it. I think this could be, like, an easy shift for him to be able to pick it up or not pick it up. I mean, whether he goes Neath or not, or Poseidon or not, I think they're both going to look really good. And we're probably in for another early game, at least similar. I mean, like you said, the Warriors should theoretically be able to adapt to what the Kings are bringing. I think they have a couple of picks here that are going to help elevate things or change the way that their gameplay was early on to maybe save them, but it's definitely going to be I think a risk from both sides here.
It is a puzzle yet again from the Camelot Kings. Where do the puzzle pieces lie in game 2? Let's find out.
Let's delay no further and jump to see who's going to be going jungle. It's going to be the Poseidon there this time, so Netrioid will be taking the Kleedna back into the duo lane here in game number 2. It's J-Mac, it's Mifflin, it's Rosie one more time in their second game of this set of the Kings versus the Warriors. And how do you feel about this one, Mifflin? I mean, Gore's not too sold on the Poseidon jungle out here. What are your kind of takeaways on it?
I mean, am I a massive Poseidon jungle fan? No. Am I a detractor from it either? Not really. I think that it's just another selection that some of these players seem to have in their back pocket. Historically, Twig been very successful on this pick in multiple roles. If he feels comfortable on it, has decent gank potential. One of the most mobile mages in the game. That additional movement speed you get from the title meter, very helpful for maneuvering the map. And then once you tick over to level 5, if you catch someone unaware, if they haven't got an Aegis available or their leaps down, Kraken's just going to kill them. My only concern with Poseidon is that he is exploitable in that an enemy jungler can just walk at you or you're slow.
A lot of damage thrown towards Vogue. Good thing that he can jump onto that wall with that dash there. So he'll get away from the raining damage immediately after. That's a lot of burst quick and early by Genetics and Netroid coming from this Geb and Kleena early in the duo lane.
It is. Kleena, though, we're still waiting for that level 5 mark. She's not at that point in the game where she is that dominant force. Once you tick over to level 5, then you start having a little bit more control in this lane. Once you're able to tear that veil, then things get a little bit easier. I said earlier that the answer for the Oni Warriors against Kleena and ADC is to have Cuvo Fred rotate over a little bit more often, or at least a little bit earlier on. I think that is still true, and I would love to see this Daji make her way over towards that duo lane, especially considering the matchup against Geb. Pre-5,000 cuts should be able to deal with that shockwave very easily. So, curious to see the pathing of Cuvo Fred and where he elects to put his pressure.
And we do have Shiva going over towards Nika this time in the solo lane. Not very many times have we seen this god go over in towards that lane. We've seen it support once, but pretty much predominantly jungle, mostly in the hands of Layers and Kirmi. So now we get to see his performance over here for the Warrior solo laner. I won't ask you too much on your opinion of Shiva solo. We've already gone to length about that as far as the desk was concerned earlier on today, but we'll see how Nika can pilot this one up against Variety.
Yeah, I mean, Shiva solo, not bad. Not bad at all. I just think he's better in the jungle. Still definitely has decent matchups and can sustain very well, and is a lane bully by the simplest definitions of the term.
2v2 fight over the blue buff, riding Captain Twig. We'll be able to secure that one there. Not quite enough burn coming from Cuvo and Nika to steal that one away. So we'll just be right back into the lane and right back to farming for these two teams out here. Cuvo Fred electing to stick around this right side very often here. They'll be able to drop that Totem of Coup down. Get a little bit of pressure there for the Warriors, where typically up until this point, totem control is generally in favor of the Kings.
Yeah, the Kings and Variety specifically love playing around that. The additional MP5 it gives your team, some more farm as well, very important to the Camelot Kings style of play. So the Oni Warriors, and having that rotation from Cuvo Fred over, the aggressive rotation into the enemy blue buff allows you to fall back and look towards that minor objective, and that's exactly what the Oni Warriors do for themselves so far. Zero emphasis on the dual lane from either one of these junglers. Expecting Cuvo Fred to get involved around the same time. Both Poseidon and Daji are similar in power trajectory in that once they get their ultimate, all of a sudden now you're actually playing a god, whereas beforehand you're generally a little bit weaker. Captain Twig, though, has got the one caveat being that if he's ganking, Cuvo Fred is probably similarly ganking that same lane, but Cuvo Fred can immune the Kraken with Powwow, and Captain Twig has not got that same answer. Has to use the beads for his CC immunity.
It'll be the same thing with Big Man Tings here. He's charging up that ultimate, but no target to be seen just yet. Cuvo Fred is here. He can step up, but like you said, that Powwow right there and ready to go. Cuvo uses it for the immunity to get away from Big Man Tings, but now he doesn't have it when that Kraken comes up for Twig.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if Twig was in range to follow up there. I mean, better to have used it and not needed it than to have not used it and needed it. So Cuvo Fred right to make the safe call, but I believe Captain Twig a little bit too far away to follow up. Aggression in the duo, though. Netroid maybe caught out.
Stunned out, has to use the beats. Genetics is here, and that'll be some decent body block potential and at least some turnaround here to where now the Kings are getting aggressive up towards this Serpent camp. They will not be able to steal the offering away, but they'll at least allow Netroid to get a little bit of extra farm in that lane here. Cuvo Fred right back at it again. Solo lane seems to be the call on the side of the Oni Warriors. A blue buff now stolen from Variety.
Maybe just trusting that Vote can just hold his own in the lane, won't struggle as much up against Netroid. Don't fight on the left side of the map, and all of a sudden it's just as if a Kleena is in the game. It's not even necessarily a Kleena ADC. It seems like the Oni Warriors' answer to this unorthodox duo lane of the Camelot Kings is aversion. Just don't go over. Don't deal with it. Don't play against it. And so far, has not been too awful an answer for them. Vote slightly behind, but should be able to catch up to Netroid on this wave. Neoma has been hovering nearby a little bit more so in this game to make sure that this Kleena isn't allowed to play that same level of aggression that we saw in Game 1, but we haven't seen the power spike just yet. Netroid has not gone back to base in quite some time. Once that Soul Eater starts to get some stacks under it, then this lane might see a distinct shift.
I'm waiting for Captain Twig to rotate over towards this mid lane because beads are down on Dardas. Those were used earlier on to get away from the Cataclysm that Genetics threw out all by himself at the top end here of that entrance. Instead, it'll be what the Camelot Kings love to do best, and that's steal offerings away from the enemy team. Captain Twig will zoom his way on out of here on the Poseidon to get away from Neil and Cuvo, but it is a quick chase back in, and then a quick stop by the Warriors. I thought maybe they would continue pushing a little bit further in, but it seems like Cuvo Fred had other options.
First scepter of the game will go to the Camelot Kings. It's a good deal of farm available to them now as well. It will be picked up by Captain Twig, so even more strength for him. Maybe Twig deciding to go down a more aggressive style of build. Could be he goes down that ring path, utilizing the Trident auto attacks at point blank, like a shotgun blast, even pushed further in the DPS department by having that scepter available. Curious to see Neoma nearby. If Twig was close enough, would have thrown out that whirlpool. Could have been talking about the first crack in the game. Instead, though, it's a much more subdued pace in Game 1. 6.5 minutes in, no kills, hasn't really been a whole lot of vying for positioning. And in this small, slow microcosm of Game 2, this 6-minute period, the Oni Warriors have slightly pulled ahead.
About 700 gold up, and maybe a big fight around here. Captain Twig pulled back in, and the Kraken will not find a kill. It's a powwow from Cuvo Fred, and the ultimate out of Nika. Genetics walks up, but Genetics will not be able to walk out. He gets taken down. It's a double for Cuvo, but Variety finds one with the ultimate and the breath right after to at least trade out as a 1-for-2, but the Warriors find 2 massive picks.
2 massive picks, and one of them being First Blood will put the Oni Warriors in an advantageous spot. Blue buff being looked at here. Looked at me like Paralyzing Spit may have been able to secure that one for Variety. It's on his belt, so I gotta trust my eyes. Variety able to defend the buff himself. Nika unsuccessful in his invade, but I'm sure not too chagrined by it because the Oni Warriors come out ahead on the trade.
Yeah, won't expand their lead too much here. It's still fairly even as far as that is concerned here. Only about 600-700 gold separating these two teams here now 7.5 minutes into the game. But Captain Twig's not going to go into a ring just yet, or maybe not even at all. We'll see how that goes. Instead, it's a Tier 1 helmet for the Jungler of the Kings.
Yeah, a little bit of utility, some defense to deal with that dive that's been headed his way. Cuvo Fred did a whole lot of damage pretty quickly, and I'm sure Captain Twig would like to avoid that as best as possible in the future. Speaking of Cuvo Fred, my man has just set up a tent in the solo lane. Might be a misnomer at this point. Variety has not had a single 1v1 opportunity. It's been Nika and Cuvo running it down.
Netroid over here at the Oracle Heartbeat should be able to close those ones down. There'll be a Soul Leader out of him yet again, just like we saw in Game 1. Same thing over here for Vote, as he's gone for the Gilded Arrow into the Devourer's Gauntlets rush right away, and now building in towards some of that attack speed. But unlike the solo lane, dual lane will be where basically nothing has happened just yet. Probably the most involved we'll see anything is when Vote utilize that ultimate to crash into a fight.
And the team that is benefiting from nothing happening in the dual lane more so is Vote and the Oni Warriors. Sure, he's slightly behind. Netroid, again, is playing a god that is suited for the 1v1. Chernobog is just simply not a 1v1 character, and so Netroid will naturally be able to get more pressure in the lane and pick up some more of that neutral farm for himself. But Vote is not here to 1v1. Vote is not even necessarily here to win the lane or even remain even. It's just to distract.
Ultimate out of Vote. Will he choose to go to any other part of the map is the question. Yes, he'll dive over towards Captain Twig, but Twig was already too far away. So that's a Blink Cataclysm out of Genetics just from the ultimate there from the Hunter of the Warriors. This Tier 1 tower in mid has taken quite a beating. The Oni Warriors have put that one down to about 10% health.
Cuvo Fred lines up against Variety, has the World Weaver flying towards him.
Pao Lao won't pull anybody in. He'll just delay the stun on the Cuvo Fred. Variety jumps away. Knock up good by Nika, but not enough follow-up for the Oni Warriors to find a kill on the solo. Genetics now walking in up against 4. He'll eat 1 stun, though not from Dardas. It'll be the one from Neil with that underhanded tactics.
Just a swift disengage from the Oni Warriors. Try to get their pick on the Variety. Unsuccessful because of that World Weaver from Big Man Tings, ever keeping his head on a swivel in mid. was able to peel out for his ally. Cubo Fred, though, they've lined up a little bit too much. Captain Twig drops him low, but it's Nika taking the fight.
Nika gonna use that dash to get some extra damage out there, but Cubo Fred not having gone to base after that fight, still sitting fairly low, but no real follow-up here from the Camelot Kings. The Kraken was expended, didn't get a whole lot of value there. Into this duel in, and we see a level and a half up here for Netroid as far as that XP is concerned. But Vote, slower, a little bit slower on the build at least here to get that attack speed up. Has the Devourer's Gauntlets, though, fully stacked.
Yeah, Vote is on cruise control right now. My man is just simply unconcerned. If we had the camera a little bit lower, we might see him in, like, I don't know, just like leather sandals, flip-flops. He's in beach attire, my guy. He is not concerned about anything happening in this lane. Again, Vote's entire job is to simply survive, and it's been reflected by the Oni Warriors' approach to the map. Cubo Fred still has not even crossed the mid lane, I think. Maybe only going as far left as the red buff for farm. Outside of that, it's been all solo all the way down. And, well, Vote is simply just here to be a body in the lane.
He is just there to get some farm, some grouping up here around the Fury for the Camelot Kings. The ward will be dropped down, at least by the Warriors, to keep vision on there. But Cubo Fred, who hasn't left this right side of the map, will continue to not do so. He's going to go over towards Pyro, but he just used Dartez as a shield. That's just wrong, man.
Yeah, poor Dartez probably didn't want to have to deal with that, but the passive of ESET giving over some additional HP 5 might be able to resustain Dartez a little bit, and that's why Cubo Fred makes that decision. Absolutely not. I think it was an accident, but it's my job to be an analyst, and that's my analysis. Dartez going to use ESET's passive.
All right. We'll go with that, at least for now. But Cubo, no Pal-Lao. It's a Blink Cataclysm to find 3. A Kraken follow-up on the Cubo Fred, but that circle of protection from Dartez is keeping everybody healthy. Nika using that ultimate to dance on top of Captain Twig, pulled back in by the sweep and knocked up after.
Okay.
But Variety finds 2 with the ultimate, gets him out under the tower, but Nika is holding on to that one, no problem. He will keep that tower aggro until it goes down, just like Variety in the jungle by Cubo.
It's Netroid on the rotation in, may have stepped too far forward. That's half his HP and his beads potentially to life.
It's gonna be it. Nika is gonna be the one to grab that out, but not with a lot of return fire damage at least out of the Hunter player for the Kings. Netroid puts a lot of poke back onto Nika and Dartez, and it's a full back away by the Warriors, but now they can start at this Pyro that they tried getting earlier.
And Vote can head back to lane. Sure, won't help out with the Pyromancer, but Vote's been spending the entirety of the last 13 minutes hiding inside of his tier 1 tower. I'm sure he's gonna love the next 15 seconds while Netroid isn't on the map to clear out some of that farm and close out a bit of that gap already established in the duo. Speaking of gaps, might be a solo lane chasm here as Nika steps up. Luckily, Variety nearby, able to make sure that his mid laner does stay alive and potentially return a kill.
Stun with a stun, but a circle of protection, and the ultimate from Shiva will make sure that Nika can walk away, and as if almost nothing even happened, nearly full health again on this Warrior. We'll fight against Variety just a little bit, but it's a 2-level difference between these 2 solo laners.
It is 1-0-4, 5 of 5 effective kills by Nika, but the Camelot Kings undeterred have pulled out the Gold Fury, burning very quickly. It's going to take a concentrated effort to stop it.
Kraken will be sure to secure the Gold Fury for the Camelot Kings, but it was close. The Oni Warriors almost made their way in to grab that one out. It'll actually be 29 damage from the Veil out of this cleaner that actually ends up securing that one. So Kraken, maybe not even necessary by Captain Twig, but the Camelot Kings grab a Fury and then keep themselves in this game because it is a 3,000 gold deficit between the Kings and the Warriors.
And the Warriors have taken notice. Look at the positioning on map. Neoma no good with the hammer. Vote up to the air. Who's he landing on?
Gonna go right into the middle of the 2 tanks. Variety stunned before he can get over the wall. Genetics uses the Cataclysm, but that's the call for Cubo and Nika to go right in the Whirlpool. Slowing down Nika, but not gonna slow them down enough. Pal-Lao will pull in. Variety, Neil jumps in, but Variety finds a couple with the ultimate, throws them into the middle of everybody, but it's Big Man Tings by himself and Variety down. Nika credited to the kill. Big Man Tings already used the backflip, won't have a way to get out of this fight. It's Vote who puts him down.
Nika starts up his dance, walking down Netroid. He's got Neoma at his back. The entirety of the Oni Warriors surging forward. 3 dead. Can it go to 4? Captain Twig, well, at least he's at his base, should be able to work his way out of this fight. But the Oni Warriors, like bandits in the night, make away with their prize. A massive gold lead, a couple of flowers, maybe some buffs. That is a dominant performance from the Warriors, especially considering this is essentially the same style of draft from the Camelot Kings in Game 2. Game 1, remember, what was that, like 12,000 or so gold in the lead at around this portion of the match. And it's exactly what Dave brings up on the desk. God, I hate giving that guy credit, but can't bring that exact same style of strategy to a great team like the Oni Warriors. Download complete after Game 1, clearly.
Oni Warriors with a very nice lead here in game number 2. 5,000 in their favor. Experience still climbing up. It's a 3-level difference between the solo lane. It's a 2-level difference over there in that mid. And Vote, who is behind the entirety of this game, has finally found a lead for himself here. Picking up a Silver Branch bow as well, so a little bit of extra percent pen online now for this Chernobog. He's already starting to do some good damage in these fights. This extra attack speed, some power thrown in there. Vote is going to be shredding through these tanks.
16 minutes in, neutral objectives not spawning up for a little while. Dardes playing ESET in mid. Generally, when ESET's locked in nowadays, I have to talk about how she's got the best secure in the game until Lono's Mask is purchased. No Lono's Mask this time around, so the Oni Warriors just get to hold on to the best secure in the game. Captain Twig so far forward here. Does Cubo Fred see him? Now he does.
To teleport in, a little bit of damage through, and that tidal wave won't be enough. Cubo Fred goes up in the air. Nika will close up the kill, but now the ultimate is here from the Neath. Cubo needs a way out, and he will find it. Nika dancing around Variety, who's now in a 1 versus 4, and there's nowhere for this Cerberus to go. Make it a 1v5 as Vote shows up for the party a little bit late, but not too late for the Fire Giant to start up.
Fire Giant pulled by the Oni Warriors, 16.5 minutes in. 3 members of the Camelot Kings around, but no one actually around. This Fire Giant gonna go down absolutely for free. The Oni Warriors have done a great job of playing through these strong portions of the Camelot Kings draft. This was completely the brainchild, I gotta assume, of the coach, because that is just excellent play across the board. Cubo Fred camping out the solo lane. Vote very passive, deals with a couple of dive attempts towards them, and eventually the Oni Warriors rely on the fact that their team fight is just going to be incredibly strong. Punish the Camelot Kings in stepping a little far out of position once or twice so far this game. Now, tier 2 tower, Fire Giant on 5, transformation from Neoma. Could be a Phoenix attempt.
We do have the 5v5 as the carries have shown up. But they will not let it be so around the Phoenix. Instead, it'll just be damage out of Nika onto Captain Twig. Tier 2 tower still up in mid and left lane. It doesn't seem the Warriors are concerned at all about this mid tier 2, at least for now. Minions pushed very far back, but they've just gone ahead and backed away. I mean, I thought with this transformation out of Neil, that was the go button for one of these structures, but instead he'll use the D transformation. The entirety of the Warriors will just back away.
Yeah, transformation on the off chance that the Camelot Kings weren't in position to defend. He sees 3 members turn the corner and says, all right, guys, look, we got a lot of gold in pocket. We got plenty of time with Fire Giant, plenty of tier 2 towers that we could deal with first. Let's not take the risky play. The Oni Warriors seem to have agreed that that was the best line of action. 7,000 or so gold in the lead and plenty of time left still to play with.
Ultimate onto Nika from Big Man Tings, but it won't find a whole lot of damage here. Instead, it's Nika finding some big damage back up against Captain Twig. A full retreat from the Camelot Kings as they've spotted out the Warriors in the midst of the jungle. But it's the more Warriors -1 Vote. Still split pushing on the left side of the map. That opens up the Pyromancer, though, for the Oni Warriors to start up. Only Variety in position to try and steal, but he's not going to step far up.
Can you ever really say it's -1 when Vote's playing Chernobog? My man will jump into your shadow.
-1 physically at the moment.
Yeah, he's there spiritually and physically at a moment's notice. Variety dropped down to about 60% HP, and the Oni Warriors have now finally started to continue their siege. Vote would have loved to have kept up the split push, but a rotation from Captain Twig will put the kibosh to that one for just a moment as the Oni Warriors move into the tier 2 mid tower.
Yeah, Vote says psych. He'll stay over on this left-hand side. Meanwhile, it's a 4v5 at the mid-tier 2 tower. Vote will go ahead and chip away at the left one with no answer back from the Camelot Kings to start there, but Vote can now utilize that ultimate to get right back with the rest of the team at that moment's notice. And he'll start his slow walk back, but with only 1 minute and 20 seconds left, the Warriors don't have much time left to play with this Fire Giant. Could just be a kill on a Netroid. A quick dash away. Netroid does get into the wall in time with some help from Genetics. We'll make sure it is so. Variety. Jump down in the midst of the fight. A jump in by Neil. And Nika now into the backline. Pulls in 2. Cataclysm will slow down Nika only for an extra moment. But that tier 2 in mid is gone.
Did Nika insta-cancel his own ultimate there? All right. I mean, like, healing would have been nice, I'm sure, at least. Maybe a slight misclick from the Oni Warriors, who have been very much slow playing this Fire Giant Siege. Only 2 tier 2 towers acquired for all of their efforts, and an Oni Fury, titular Oni Fury for the Oni Warriors. 2 tier 2, I meant to say 3. They actually got that left side one as well. So, good work to the Chaos team, and have created a scenario where now 12,000 gold in the lead. They can look towards the Fire Giant themselves. Deja vu. Feels like I said the exact same thing about the Camelot Kings just was that 30 or so minutes ago.
Don't curse them. We've already had too many of those this weekend.
Yeah, I don't have that power, man. You need tenure to Caster's Curse.
Did you just do that earlier, though?
Mine was more so just like an unlucky coincidence. I didn't do it to him.
That was just happenstance over there. But for now, with this 12,000 gold lead, the Oni Warriors can start finishing up some of these starter items as they make their way back soon. Not level 20, though, just yet, except for Vote, who'll be able to finish up that Gilded Arrow starter item and get a 5th item in his build, a Wind Demon, a very late crit item for this Chernobog, kind of contrary to what we've been seeing before, where when Zapman was going for this Devourer's Gauntlet start, it'd be very early crit in the build.
It would be. Vote, I suppose, just concerned about his ability to shred objectives, and Wind Demon will help out a fair deal in that regard. The Oni Warriors, they've got Variety surrounded.
Variety, not too many places to go. Use the ultimate to pick up just Neilmaw. Cubo stuck in between 2 Veils, but Variety already in the grave. Dardes puts him down, but a lot expended to take him out there. Vote's ultimate earlier on, and Cubo Fred's Pow Lao, but only Captain Twig has an ultimate left on the side of the Kings.
And that Kraken has not found just about any value so far this game. Not sure that we've seen one that wasn't mitigated by Cubo Fred going into Pow Lao, or Dardes dropping Circle Protection on top of it. So, the Oni Warriors, with Variety dead for 20 seconds, will be grouping up on the Fire Giant in about 3 seconds. Unless Cubo Fred can find a pick first.
It will be a backflip, a dash in by
He's in
Netroid.
trouble.
Cubo Fred should go down here. It will be Netroid. Credit to the kill, but now Netroid is too low to get inside the wall, so he is just stuck between a rock and between Nika. Nika will dash right in, and that'll be an easy pickup for the solo lane.
That's a 1-for-1 trade, I suppose, unless you want to add Variety to the list, but he's already made his way back.
Vote and Neilmaw against Variety. Variety does not have a whole lot of help as a level 15 Cerberus. He will get shredded out instantly, and Genetics, who thought about walking into this fight, will get stonewalled by just Dardes alone. On the run is this lone Gab, but it's a Spirit Ball, a knock-up, and a pull-in by the sweep to make it a double kill for Vote, and 3 gone on the Kings.
For about 30 seconds as well. Minion wave already pushed up. The Oni Warriors can start their siege in earnest. 2 members still alive, Captain Twig and Big Man Tinks. Great at defending. Had they been here, they simply were not.
They were very late to do so. Nika instead is going to be the one who goes in aggressive. Double dash in, but Big Man Tings has enough sustain for only a moment's notice. Nika goes down, gets him. Dardes takes him down, and it's only the Titan left to defend itself against the Oni Warriors. A 2-0, maybe not the outcome that anybody had truly expected out here. Dardes and Netroid will trade out some kills, but the Titan goes down, and the Oni Warriors will sweep the Kings.
You're telling me the Oni Warriors were capable of doing this the whole time? They've been holding it back on me the whole time? If they could do this more often, the conversation we built around the Oni Warriors, a much different look at this squad, and 2 different versions of them in the exact same set. One was a miraculous comeback in team fights that they had no rights to win, and the other was, hey, we saw your cards earlier. You can't just play the exact same hand. A dominant game 2 that was never in question.
I mean, the Kings come out strong in game number 1, like we say. I mean, a 12,000 plus gold lead that they had, then losing out, and they decided to test the fates and run it back again. But just like Dave was saying on the desk, a good team will not let you run that same strat twice. The Oni Warriors do not. They capitalize big here in game 2.
They do. Team fights all go their way. They were able to optimize very well off every single one of their picks. Objectives in the early, which was traditionally where the Oni Warriors had struggled in the past, was transitioning early game leads into solidified late game scenarios. Well, it's one game. I won't say those issues, those concerns have been completely alleviated, but we see now that they are capable.
Oni Warriors with a strong win out here up against the Camelot Kings. They take the 2-0. We'll take it to a break, and and the desk will bring us home.
한숨 같던 하루 끝 허기를 달래려 잠이 드는 아이들의 기도가 들려오네. 힘이 되어줄게. 내일의 희망을 노래할 수 있게. Link your arms to mine. Heart to heart we try to be each other's light forever. Oh, may no lives be denied. Let our children smile. Don't be afraid. You're not alone. 깊게 패인 상처에 한마디 말이 위안이 될 리 없지만 곁에 있을게. 또 다른 내일을 꿈꿀 수 있게. Link your arms to mine. Heart to heart we try to be each other's light forever. Oh, may no lives be denied. Let our children smile. Don't be afraid. No, love transcends all borders. We're all in this together. Never alone. 기적을 믿어. Beyond walls arise. New day. Link your arms to mine. Heart to
Wish I could figure the SPL out at all this year. Season 9 of the SPL gets
What do you
even
mean?
what do you mean?
You figured it out the other day. You said any of these teams could beat any of them on a good day.
Yeah, I guess
You've
that's
got it figured out.
and it's that nobody's ever going to be able to predict any of these games. One final time for this week. I will throw Mifflin under the bus. He has
Yeah.
cast or cursed the Camelot Kings now this weekend. And I quote, and this is Miff, I'm taking the Camelot Kings against the field, he said on
That is what he said.
Friday prior to the Kings' first match. And I said, I don't know about against the field. And he said, who's beating these guys? Repeating it twice. And I said, I don't know any of these teams on a good day. Oh, we got it ready. Yeah. And now I will be fair to Miff. I think going into this week,
Do you have to be?
yeah, I have to be. Being fair to Miff, going into this week, I am, you're taking the Kings based on the way that they've looked in their last couple of matchups. You're taking the Kings probably in both, and so I don't necessarily disagree with Miff's predictions.
Yeah.
But I think Miff just cast or cursed the Kings pretty hard here. So not only do they lose up against the Titans and the Warriors score, and we'll have to break down game 2 here at some point. They do it in 2-0 fashion. They don't get a single game win this week and go 0-2 in their sets.
Yeah, it's maybe not the look that you want coming out of week 4. Especially, again, we were talking about how important like being in the top 4 is right now. A really, really big deal. And you had talked about it, but during this game, so game 1, it's 22, 23 minutes of the Kings winning, and then some really good team fight play from the Warriors in the last few fights, right? They win, I think, around an FG. They are able to kind of push them back, go in and even fight the second time, and then win the game with an FG fight towards the end. This one just kicked off. I mean, immediately they were riding the exact same high, the exact same kind of play style, and it is a lot, like Mifflin had mentioned it, you will see a lot of these highlights are on the right-hand side of the map, and it's because they recognize, you know what, let's not play into the Kleina, let's not give her anything that they wanted, because despite the loss in game 1, it was still like 6-1 or something ridiculous. And so just let Vote farm. He's playing this Chernobog. He can be anywhere on the map, and they do that pretty successfully. And instead, you get Cuvo, you get Nika being very, very involved in a lot of these kills, a lot of presence from the Daji, the Powwow, once again forcing beads or ults, where otherwise the Kings might have been able to re-engage and have a successful fight. And if that didn't work out, then you had the Shiva that was just going incredibly deep and able to chase people down for kills using the double dash and finding really good knockups for the rest of the team. It just felt like everything really worked hand in hand for them. I think it's impressive. Like, wow. I mean, 6-1 is really solid. The 4-0 and 10 for Dardes, the 3-0 and 8 for Vote. But I think it is those top two that Nika and Cuvo Fred really kicking things off. Good setup from Neil, and then the carries getting to just sit back once again, do a lot of damage. I mean, you get 14k from Dardes. I think we got to see this E-set in mid and really showcase what it could bring with a lot of stuns and a lot of good damage.
Yeah, what a difference one game makes here for the Oni Warriors. And Gore, that's something we talked about going into game number 2 after Picks and Bans had already wrapped up. You know, we're thinking it's hard to beat a good team twice. I mean, they didn't even beat the Warriors in game 1. It's hard to get off to that good of a start twice with a very similar composition against a good team. A good team will find answers. That's what the Oni Warriors and Cuvo Fred did in game number 2. Cuvo Fred now with me for the post-game interview after a 2-0 win over the Camelot Kings. Cuvo, congrats on the big win. This is a big win. If you can, think back to game 1. You guys were in a massive deficit for like 20 minutes. What ends up turning around in that game?
Yeah, I mean, that game is clear as day in my head. They have a very strong draft with 3 Guardians and 2 100 and a Kleina ADC. So I knew they had a good grip on the early game. They have a lot of globals and the Fina and the Nifos, and I'm playing Dayi with the Blink. And that's a risk I'm willing to take because I'm ready to play the game. But yeah, they played that draft very, very well in the early game, given we did some mistakes for sure. Yeah. But ultimately, I knew if we make it late, we have a very strong draft and we have a very strong team fight as well.
And the Kings bring back some similarities in the second game. They stick with the Kleina ADC. Specifically with that, did you feel like you guys had enough data from game 1 that you knew how to deal with it a little bit better in game 2?
Yeah, I mean, first game, there's definitely just some mistakes we can easily avoid, I would say. But the second game, we knew what made that draft feel so strong in the early game, and we took a bit away from it. And yeah, like second game, we come out and we know what we want to do. We know we're a strong team, and we've been working a lot on like team fighting and playing the game and just the head in the game. So I knew second game we have a good early game. We played clean. We're gonna make it late for sure.
And kind of final thoughts from you. Obviously, post game, this is a big win for you guys, a big statement. Lots of emotion coming out of the player booth. Where does that come from? Do you feel like you guys are finally proving something to yourselves, maybe viewers out there, the league, the fans, getting wins like this?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, like I'm just passionate about the game. I love playing the game, and like I want to make the most of it. So I'm always I'm always hyped about it. I always bring the best energy and elevate my teammates. I want to be the best we can be. So I'm just always hyped to play. I want to be the best I can be as well. So. Yep. That's why I bring the hype. I play off the energy, and I like bringing up the emotions and like just doing it to the fullest.
I'm sure the team plays off your energy as well. Big statement win for you guys. Congrats, and go enjoy the win.
Thank you.
And so the Oni Warriors score. They put a statement on the end of this week in the SPL, and my goodness, what a week we had in the SPL. And surprising for me to kind of say that with an exhale, because a lot of our sets were lopsided, right? I mean, all of our matches this week felt like one way or another, one team was just in control. Yeah. Where the Olympus Bolts grab a 2-0. Leviathans 2-0. I'll just go ahead and copy and paste 2-0 for every single match this week. And the way that some of them broke down was just so interesting. I mean, the Bolts and the Leviathans getting their wins on Friday, maybe not as surprising. Jade Dragon's a convincing win. It's really around these Titans set score. And then, of course, the Bolts set today, where the Jade Dragons grab a 2-0. And then I think truly the most surprising of the week is the Oni Warriors over the Kings. So an 0-2 week gore in sets for the Kings, 0-4 in individual games.
I think a lot of people this week would have said that this set was going to be a 2-0.
Yeah.
And nobody ever, not a single person would have said that it was a Warriors 2-0. Maybe there's like a 10%er out there, right? But a majority of it would not have banked on that. And now we get into this interesting position because, we're looking at it right now. This is week 3. There's only 4 weeks in Phase 1. After that, the top 4 teams are going to a seeding land. They're going to play each other. I believe it's just a Saturday and Sunday. Might be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. No, it's a Saturday, Sunday. And they're going to be playing for seeding not only in Masters as the top 4, but also for Phase 2 and things like that. So like wins like that are absolutely nuts to essentially like ruin someone's hope of potentially getting up there.
Yeah, so we'll now have, Gore, 4 teams with 3 wins after the Oni Warriors grab a win over the Camelot Kings. And so next week, being the last week of Phase 1 of the SPL, going into Masters, becomes very, very important in separating out those top 4 teams from the bottom 4 teams as far as differences in their matches, Gore. And so the Tartarus Titans and the Jade Dragons with a little bit of breathing room up top on the standings, but their matchups going into next week, none of the top 6 teams immune from moving and shaking and changing around. The Olympus Bolts and the Tartarus Titans will battle in our first match of next week, and then the 6 Scarabs and the Oni Warriors. So think of this, where if the Oni Warriors get a win over the Scarabs and the Bolts beat the Titans, suddenly you're going to have a 4-way tie with 4 teams with 4 wins at the top of the standings if those games go that direction. Leviathans and Bolts on Saturday. And then the Camelot Kings back in action for the final time this phase up against the Valks on Sunday. Still a chance for the Kings, despite being 3-3. To break into that top 4. Leviathans and Dragons, and then Titans and Warriors score a loaded schedule going into next week. And again, with the top 4 and the bottom 4 being so important for Masters, things couldn't be closer right now. It really feels like top 6 right now can go anyway.
And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, top 6, that's the key. I know, I don't think we've put out the Masters format yet, but I'm going to say this anyway. The bottom 2 of the SPL are having to play in week 1. The top 6 don't play until week 2. So whether you want to, if you consider it an advantage to play as many as possible or not, it is something that you're going to have to go through even more of a gauntlet, even more of a slog, a lot more games to play. If you're in the bottom 2, if you're in the bottom 4, you're still going to have even more than the top 4. So things like that are going to really play after this next week. And so there's a lot that is going on. And again, that one's going to be for a pretty good chunk of change. So I'm excited to see how these teams handle this next week's match, knowing that there's so much that can shift.
Loaded week of the SPL this week, Gore. 7 sets, all of them go 2-0. One final week of the SPL remains in week number 1, and then we'll get into Masters a couple weeks after that. What a fun week it's been, but unfortunately it's got to come to an end. So on behalf of myself, Gore Miser, all the other casters, everyone back in production, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.